What if I told you that the way you think about money, jobs, inflation, interest rates, and even the future of your family was quietly shaped by a single man most people have never heard of? A man who never ran for office, never led a company, and never controlled a bank, yet whose ideas now guide governments, central banks, and financial markets around the world. Because before Paul Samuelson, economics was closer to philosophy than science, and no one could truly agree on how the invisible engine of capitalism worked. And it was this confusion that allowed depressions, booms, and crashes to happen with terrifying force. But everything began to change when a skinny, book-obsessed kid from Indiana arrived at Harvard with a dangerous idea that money could be turned into math, and that human behavior and markets could be predicted with equations just like physics. And at first almost no one took him seriously because economists at the time wrote essays and argued opinions rather than building models. But Samuelson believed that if economics controlled the fate of nations, it had to be measurable, provable, and testable. So while the world was fighting wars and rebuilding nations, he was quietly writing formulas that described how consumers spend, how businesses invest, and how fear and optimism ripple through markets. And slowly something shocking happened, as his numbers began to match reality, predicting recessions, explaining booms, and showing why. Inflation and unemployment rise and fall, and by the 1940s and 1950s governments started listening because Samuelson's models gave them something they had never had before, a way to see the future of the economy before it happened. And this changed everything, because once you believe you can predict the economy, you also believe you can control it. And Samuelson's greatest contribution was bringing Keynesian economics into the heart of American policy. The idea that during economic downturns, governments should not sit back and let markets collapse, but should step in, spend money, create jobs, and stabilize demand. And this idea helped shape the New Deal, guided post-war growth, and became the blueprint for how America and much of the world handled recessions. And his textbook Economics became the most widely used economics book in history, teaching generations of students, politicians, bankers, and policymakers how to think about money through Samuelson's lens. So whether you know his name or not, his influence touches your paycheck, your taxes, your mortgage, and even the price of groceries. But with this power came deep controversy, because some critics argued that by giving governments tools to manipulate the economy, also gave them the power to create massive debt, inflation, and artificial booms that would eventually crash. And history gave them ammunition in the 1970s, when inflation spiraled out of control, and again in 2008, when financial markets nearly collapsed. Yet even in those crises, policymakers turned to Samuelson's ideas for solutions by cutting interest rates, injecting money, and stimulating demand. Shows the strange truth that even when people argue against Samuelson, they are still using his framework, his language, and his equations. Because he didn't just describe capitalism, he built the operating system that runs it. And one of the most powerful and unsettling aspects of his legacy is that modern economics became dependent on models, numbers, and experts, turning what was once a chaotic human system into something that feels scientific and controlled. But beneath those equations are still human emotions like greed, fear, and hope. And no formula can fully capture them, which raises the haunting question of whether a system built on imperfect models can ever truly be stable. Because when governments believe their equations, they may take risks they would never take otherwise, printing money, running deficits, and trusting that the math will save them. And sometimes it does, but sometimes it leads to bubbles, inequality, and financial fragility that hurt ordinary people the most. And yet without Samuelson's work, modern capitalism might be even more unstable, lacking the tools to fight recessions and soften economic shocks, which makes his story so powerful and complicated because he did not simply save or destroy capitalism. He transformed it into something new, a system guided by data, models, and policy rather than pure market forces. And this transformation affects your life every day, whether you realize it or not. When interest rates change, when stimulus checks are sent, when inflation rises, or when jobs are created, all of it flows from the intellectual revolution Samuelson began. And perhaps the most remarkable thing about him is that he never sought fame or power, yet became one of the most influential people in modern history, simply by changing how the world thinks about money, and the final twist is that the same tools he created to bring stability also made the system more complex and harder for ordinary people to understand. Creating a world where financial decisions are made by experts behind closed doors, using equations few can read, which leaves us with a chilling question that still hangs over the global economy today. If modern economics is built on models, what happens when those models are wrong? So tell me in the comments, do you think Paul Samuelson saved capitalism, or made it too powerful and fragile at the same time? Like this video if it changed how you see money in markets, and subscribe to Finance TED Official, because the biggest forces shaping your financial future were written decades ago by a man you probably never heard of.